Kawartha, Bright Waters, Iron Highway, the epic story of Peterborough and Canada's most ambitious waterway. Part 1. The Water's Edge, the Deep Past, Scene 1. The Edge of the Shield. There are places on this continent where the land itself tells two stories at once. In the heart of central Ontario, Canada, lies a region where two worlds collide, the city of Peterborough and the mosaic of lakes known collectively as the Kawarthas. It is a land defined by water, a place whose very name, from the Anishinabeg word, translates roughly to bright waters and happy lands. The Kawarthas are not just a collection of cottages and marinas. They are a profound geological fault line. To the north, the ancient granite of the Canadian Shield, rugged, scarred by glaciers, home to pine forests and rocky islands. To the south, the soft, rich Paleozoic limestone, the foundation of fertile soil and abundant farmland. Peterborough sits directly on this seam, a city born at the precise point where nature offered both immense challenge and immense opportunity. The chains of lakes, Sturgeon, Keemong, Pigeon, Stony, Clear, Buckhorn, form the upper watershed of the Trent River. This intricate, interconnected system would, millennia later, define human settlement, commerce, and engineering. But its first, deepest history belongs to the people who read the waters and the stones. The sacred stones. Long before any European mapmaker charted these rivers, this land was, and remains, the traditional territory of the Anishinabeg people. To understand the Kawarthas, one must first visit a sacred space, a place known in Ojibwe as Kinumage Wabong, the Teaching Rocks. Petroglyphs Provincial Park holds the largest known concentration of indigenous rock carvings in Canada. More than 900 images are etched into the exposed marble like limestone, a visual record spanning centuries, possibly millennia. These aren't mere illustrations, they are spiritual guides, maps of cosmology, and records of community knowledge. Here, carved into the stone, we find the ancestors of the Anishinabeg expressing their relationship with the natural world. Carvings depict the Great Turtle, a central figure in their creation story, the foundation of Turtle Island, the Thunderbirds, powerful spirits of the upper world, and various human and animal forms. The intricate symbols, often painted red with ochre, functioned as a powerful spiritual library, a place where generations came to transmit knowledge of hunting grounds, celestial events, and traditional laws. This is evidence of a sophisticated, continuous culture that thrived by mastering the waterways and forests that define the region. The carvings testify to the importance of the lakes as a traditional gathering place. They served as vital arteries for travel, trade, and diplomacy long before the roar of lumber mills or the blast of canal construction changed the landscape forever. The Serpent and the Mound Builders. Just south of the main Kawartha chain lies Rice Lake, and there, an even older mystery is preserved. Serpent Mounds National Historic Site. Here, 9 ancient burial mounds rise from the shoreline, a testament to peoples who predate even the petroglyph carvers, dating back almost 2,000 years. The most striking feature is the Serpentine Mound itself, a massive, snake-like earthwork believed to be the only one of its type in Canada. These mounds offer archaeologists a rare glimpse into the spiritual practices and social organization of the Point Peninsula culture, ancestors of today's Anishinabeg. The proximity of Serpent Mounds to the wild rice beds of Rice Lake confirms the area's central importance as a sustained food source and cultural hub. The cycle of the seasons, the harvest of manumin, wild rice, the fishing, the hunting, all revolved around the life-giving lakes. Elder, archaeologist. The land is living history here. When you stand at the Serpent Mounds and look over the lake, you are standing on a landscape that has nourished people for 2,000 years. The water is the memory, and the mounds are the markers of continuity. The arrival of the French, Champlain's Passage. The first European eyes to witness the brilliance of the Kawarthas belonged to Samuel de Champlain. In 1615, guided by his Huron-Wendat allies, Champlain journeyed through this winding water system, traveling from Georgian Bay on Lake Huron down toward Lake Ontario's Bay of Quinte. Champlain's journal entries, though sparse on geographical detail, confirm that this was an established indigenous route, the precursor to the modern Trent-Severn Waterway. He passed through this labyrinth of lakes, recognizing their potential as a strategic and commercial corridor. But the full-scale European colonization and subsequent settlement did not begin in earnest for another 2 centuries. When it did, the primary draw was not trade, but timber, and the immense power of the rivers. The natural obstacles, the rapids, the falls, and the changing water levels, that the indigenous paddlers managed with portage, were seen by the new settlers as problems to be solved, obstacles to be conquered. The stage was set for the arrival of the axe, the mill, and the lock. Peterborough's founding, the Irish contingent. The formal settlement of the city that would become Peterborough began in 1825, under the direction of the Honourable Peter Robinson, a prominent politician. This ambitious undertaking involved settling 2,000 destitute Irish immigrants, many of whom had been displaced by economic hardship and political upheaval in Ireland. Robinson's effort was a pivotal moment in Canadian immigration history. The settlers were granted land, tools, and provisions, establishing a critical mass of population in what was then the remote frontier of Upper Canada. This Irish influx left an indelible cultural mark, shaping the early political, religious, and social fabric of the nascent town. The original settlement site, located on the Otonabee River just south of the Kawartha Lakes chain, was strategically chosen for its water power. Sawmills and gristmills sprang up almost immediately, harnessing the energy that flowed from the upper lakes. The natural geography that had once provided peaceful passage was now being violently leveraged for industry. The flow of water meant power, power meant mills, and mills meant wealth carved out of the massive white pine forests of the north. This demand for timber and power would soon lead to the greatest intervention in the region's natural geography, the century-long project to build a continuous, navigable route from Lake Ontario to Georgian Bay. An ambitious, often absurd, undertaking that would culminate in an engineering marvel the world had never seen. The bright waters had been found. The happy lands were being claimed. But to bind these wild, disparate lakes together would require human ambition on a scale that threatened to dwarf the landscape itself. That story begins with a blueprint for a continuous waterway, a system of locks and channels that would reshape the geography of central Ontario forever. Part 2. The Iron Highway, the Industrial Era, Scene 1. Taming the Wild Flow. The promise of power and the wealth of the northern forests demanded a solution to the Kawartha's natural chaos of rapids and falls. The indigenous paddlers had managed the waters, the settlers sought to control them entirely. The project, to build a continuous, navigable route from Lake Ontario, through the heart of the Kawarthas, all the way to Georgian Bay, a system that would become the Trent-Severn Waterway. The vision was grand, but the reality was a century of backbreaking, stop-start construction. Beginning in the 1830s, engineers battled shifting geology, enormous funding challenges, and the sheer unpredictability of the Canadian climate. Every lock, every dam, every dredged channel was an act of geological defiance, forcing the Otonabee, the Trent, and the myriad lakes to obey the single, straight line of commerce. The purpose was clear: to haul the world's most coveted wood, the towering white pine of the Canadian Shield, down to the mills, and to move goods and settlers into the interior. The canal, initially, was an economic weapon, designed to capture the immense wealth flowing out of the Kawartha watershed. Scene 2. The Timber Tsunami. For a few decades in the mid-19th century, the system was dominated by timber. The spring melt brought not just water, but a catastrophic flood of logs, stripped from the Shield, crashing downriver. Peterborough, strategically positioned at the river's choke point, exploded into a boomtown of lumber barons, mill workers, and industrial steam. The construction of dams and control structures, essential for the canal, simultaneously created deep water reservoirs that facilitated these log drives. But this mastery came at a cost. Traditional indigenous fishing grounds were permanently altered, lake levels fluctuated wildly, and the aquatic ecosystem was violently disrupted by the millions of logs jammed through the channels. The wild rice beds of Rice Lake, crucial for the Anishinaabe, faced devastating ecological change. It was a furious, destructive period. The goal was simple: get the timber out. The waterways were no longer pristine, they were highways for industrial resource extraction. The Trent-Severn, even in its incomplete state, was instrumental in enabling this vast deforestation. Scene 3. The Iron Rival. Just as the massive waterway project was gaining momentum, a new, faster, more unforgiving technology arrived: the Iron Highway. Railroads like the Midland Railway, pushing through the limestone plains, offered what the water could not: speed, reliability, and year-round transport. Timber, once laboriously rafted down the Trent, could be loaded onto a train and shipped to Toronto or Montreal in a fraction of the time. The trains didn't freeze in winter, and they didn't require complex, slow locks. The railway quickly became the commercial spine of central Ontario. It stole the canal's primary purpose almost before the canal was even finished. Peterborough became an early railway hub, cementing its role as a regional economic center, but the reason for the Great Waterway's existence was suddenly called into question. Why finish a century-long, multi-million-dollar canal when the train could do the job better? Scene 4. The monument to ambition, the lift lock. The answer lay in a spectacular, audacious piece of engineering that would ensure the Trent-Severn Waterway survived its obsolescence, the Peterborough hydraulic lift lock. Completed in 1904, it was, at the time, the highest hydraulic lift lock in the world, raising and lowering boats over 20 meters. It works on a simple principle: two massive steel bathtubs, or chambers, balanced like a scale. By adding a small excess of water to the upper chamber, gravity and the genius of hydraulics shift the balance, effortlessly lifting one chamber as the other descends. This lock was a symbol of late Victorian industrial confidence, a declaration that human ingenuity could conquer any geographic challenge. It cut construction time and costs dramatically, demonstrating that the Trent-Severn wasn't just a relic of the past, but a triumph of engineering for the new century. Scene 5. A new identity. But the lift lock arrived too late to save the canal's commercial destiny. The Iron Highway won the freight war. Instead, the completion of the waterway in 1920 ushered in a new era: recreation. The slow, winding, interconnected lakes, now stabilized by the locks and dams, became a paradise for tourism, boating, and leisure. The very system built to carry logs and industry found its true calling as a route for pleasurecraft. The scars of the lumber era began to fade, replaced by marinas, resorts, and cottages that defined the modern Kawartha experience. The Trent-Severn Waterway became the scenic heart of the region, the final, undeniable link between the rugged north and the fertile south. It proved that human ambition, even when rooted in outdated industrial goals, can ultimately create beauty and connection. Part 3. The modern waterway, the recreational pivot, the birth of cottage country. Following its completion in 1920, the Trent-Severn Waterway quickly shed its industrial skin. It was reborn as Canada's premier recreational corridor. The slow, regulated flow, once engineered for logging barges, was now perfect for pleasurecraft. The lakes, stabilized by the system of dams, became the foundation for a cultural phenomenon: cottage country. The post-war economic boom in southern Ontario fueled an exodus every summer weekend. Toronto and the surrounding cities poured money and people into the Kawarthas, transforming the rugged shorelines of the Canadian Shield and the gentle banks of the limestone lakes into a landscape of leisure. The region's identity became intrinsically tied to this seasonal rhythm, a cycle of relaxation, fishing, and boating. In the summer, our economy lives and breathes by the waterway. It's what draws them here. People drive hours just to experience the sheer peace of navigating these interconnected lakes. But it's a double-edged sword. The very thing that makes the Kawarthas desirable is what we struggle to protect. Scene 2. The delicate balance of water. The engineering triumphs of the 19th century created the waterway, but today, Parks Canada and local authorities face the constant, complex challenge of water management. The system is no longer just for boats, it's a juggling act for modern needs: flood mitigation for communities downstream, water supply for local residents, and hydroelectric power generation. Every turn of a sluice gate has ecological consequences. Maintaining stable, high enough water levels for the millions of recreational visitors during the summer conflicts directly with the needs of the natural ecosystems and the traditional water cycles the wildlife rely upon. This intensive development has strained the water's edge. Runoff from shoreline development, coupled with the introduction of invasive species like zebra mussels and Eurasian water milfoil, threatens the clear waters that gave the region its name. The fight is no longer against the river, but for the river. Preserving the health of the watershed is now the central economic and environmental crisis of the Kawarthas. Scene 3. Peterborough's evolution, post-industrial pivot. Meanwhile, the city of Peterborough has evolved far past its origins as a raw lumber and milling hub. As the traditional industries faded, the city pivoted. Today, it's a regional center for education, arts, and technology. The presence of Trent University, with its unique, architecturally striking campus on the Otonabee River, has fostered a new, knowledge-based economy, often focusing on environmental and indigenous studies, bringing intellectual focus back to the land and water. The lift lock, once a commercial symbol, is now the picturesque heart of the city's identity, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. The city's industrial legacy remains, but it has been repurposed. Old factory buildings now house innovative startups and cultural spaces. The reliance on the railway and the canal for freight is gone, replaced by a reliance on the aesthetic and recreational value of the surrounding natural landscape. Scene 4. Conservation and Stewardship. In the 21st century, the story is shifting from conquest to conversation. There is a growing movement, led by conservation groups and local Anishinaabe communities, to restore the health of the water and the land. Projects focus on reintroducing native species, restoring wetlands that naturally filter pollutants, and teaching shoreline property owners how to coexist with the ecosystem. The spirit of the Kinumage Wabang, the teaching rocks, is returning, offering modern residents lessons in stewardship and respect for the environment. The challenge of the modern waterway is a reflection of a global dilemma. How do we benefit from a natural resource without destroying it? The Kawarthas, bound by a history of engineering and ambition, are now attempting to find a sustainable way to live in harmony with the bright waters that have defined them for millennia. The iron highway is silent. The timber rush is over. What remains is the water, the ancient history etched in stone, and a new generation tasked with protecting the legacy of the bright, happy lands. Part 4. Future Shores, the Climate Imperative, the New Reality of Water. The greatest challenge to the Kawartha's identity is not a new industry, but a change in the global climate. The predictable cycles that defined life here for millennia, the winter freeze, the spring melt, the reliable summer depth, are becoming erratic. The century-old water management system, the Trent Severn Waterway, now operates under increasing stress. Extreme weather events mean intense, short-burst flooding, demanding rapid action from loch masters to protect communities. Conversely, prolonged summer droughts threaten navigation and create crisis conditions for aquatic life. The debate over water levels, once a localized issue between boaters and property owners, is now a crucial matter of environmental security. Scientist. We are seeing the limits of 19th century engineering. The system was built for a stable climate, and we don't have that anymore. Future sustainability demands flexibility, adaptive infrastructure, and a mindset that accepts that we cannot always control the water, but must learn to live with its dynamic shifts. Scene 2. A green and digital future. Peterborough and the surrounding county are positioning themselves as a hub for the green economy and decentralized work. The historical reliance on resource extraction has shifted to a focus on knowledge, sustainable technology, and local resilience. Trent University, with its focus on environmental science and engineering, drives much of this innovation. Local businesses are exploring everything from regenerative agriculture on the rich limestone plains to developing climate-resilient construction methods for the granite shorelines. The quality of life, proximity to nature, access to the waterways, has become the primary economic magnet. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this trend, bringing a new wave of permanent residents who sought out the balance of nature and community. Scene 3. Reclamation and Reconciliation. Perhaps the most profound shift in the Kawarthas is the recognition that genuine sustainability must be built upon the traditional knowledge of the land's first caretakers. The Anishinaabe communities, including the Curve Lake and Hiawatha First Nations, are stepping into a vital leadership role in the stewardship of the watershed. Traditional ecological knowledge, refined over thousands of years of continuous residency, is now being integrated into modern water management and conservation policies. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science offers the most hopeful path forward. Reconciliation, in this context, is not just a political act, it is an ecological necessity. The water is life. It has memory. Our ancestors taught that if you take care of the water will take care of you. We are not separate from the environment, we are part of it. This lesson, written on the rocks at Kinumage Wabang, is the key to the future of the bright waters. Scene 4. The Enduring Legacy. The history of Peterborough and the Kawarthas is a constant interplay between the monumental forces of nature and the relentless ambition of humanity. The land was carved by glaciers, settled by immigrants, engineered for industry, and preserved by recreation. From the first canoes gliding past sacred stones, to the clatter of the iron railway, to the serene wake of a modern sailboat, the story remains anchored in the water. The challenge now is to honor the promise held within the Anishinaabe name, Kawartha, bright waters and happy lands, for the generations who will follow. The fight for the future of this region is the fight for the resilience of the water. And in that ongoing commitment, the deep, storied soul of the Kawarthas endures.